next chapter is attacking clients. Our objectives: introduce client-side attacks, review 2 methods for the attacks, define typical attacks, and examine some client-side exploits. The good news is, unlike servers, clients do not sit and wait for us to attack them. That's bad. But it's easy to get the client to come to us. Click here. We know users are going to click. They all click. How many of you click when you see user account control? Something pops up and says, oh, we need administrator rights to accesses. Yes, 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 yes. We always know the user's going to click. And we're hacking, so this is good. So now that we're hacking, it's good that users will click. 2 methods of attack. We can bait them, set a trap, and wait for someone to come to us. Anybody ever done phishing? You put a worm on the hook or some type of bait, and you just wait for the fish to come? Is there a chance the fish may never come? Yes. So because of that, bait usually is the least desirable method we want to try. Instead, what we want to do is a lure. And the best lure is click here for the latest sporting event. Say if there's a sporting event going on. There's been a lot of compromises in the UK during World Cup. When the World Cup goes on, stuff like that, you send out an email and tell everybody, hey, click here for the latest information on the World Cup. 200,000 users click it. All right? So this is the method of how we have to do client-side attacks. So what we do is we trick the user into coming to us. So that's what the diagram's showing here. We set up a rogue server for the client to come to. And what that normally means is we just start a web server up on our machine and send something to the user and say, click here. And when they click there, they, as you see in the diagram, connect to our rogue server. Well, often what's asked is, well, what do you do when they connect to the rogue server? Anything you want. We can intercept the username, password, or credentials, intercept their credit card if it's within the scope of work. This is more of a malicious hacker type thing, but if the scope of work is for a bank trying to see if you can compromise any of their employees' information or anything like that, you might very well have in your scope of work to do this type of thing. Rarely done in a red team, but it could be possible. Okay, it can occur in any client-server interaction. We all think about email because we hear it all the time. We all think about web servers because we go to a website and we click on a link there. But what about instant messaging? How many of you use instant messaging? This is one of the most common ways. Twitter. How many of you look at Twitter? Tweets. You click on a link in the tweet. You're asking for this type of attack. Voice over IP. All these types of things can be used. Typical defenses are protect the servers, which we already talked about the servers, how to attack them, and the firewalls are a gate. So since the firewalls are a gate, if they have to allow this service, it's going through the firewall. Firewall defense is not going to help you here. You have to look at other types of things, which is good news for us as the attackers, because we're on offense. We don't care about defense right now. Maybe after offense we will, but right now we don't. Nice thing about the client. Client's trusted. He's already inside our network. Protection's light, usually antivirus. Should have on their internal firewall, some do, some don't. Endpoint security should be, some do, some don't. Again, it's all part of our methodology, our structured process, and our plan to figure out what's there and how to defeat it. The browser has control. Sends a warning message all the time to the user. But what's the user always do? Oh, I need this, I need that. You ignore them, you click here, you click there, install this, install that. Game over. Here's an example of setting up a malicious PDF. One of the most popular ones to do is create a PDF file. And in that PDF file, you put a listener and set up an exploit. You send an email to the victim. It passes the antivirus scan, because more than likely it's there, because it's a PDF file. Victim opens the file and creates a reverse shell back to us. We actually do demonstrations of this. Well, how do we create the PDF? We configure a tool. Remember our tool, our exploit framework, Metasploit, has a file creation capability in it that allows us to create the PDF. And that's what we're showing here. Use exploit windows, file format, Adobe util printf. So what we're doing here is we're setting up a utility to create a PDF. And you look there, we call it upgrade instructions. So it's going to be upgrade instructions for a computer. Oh, how many people is going to double click this at work? Everybody, because they see the latest upgrade. Set the payload. In this case, we're using a payload called Meterpreter. Meterpreter is an advanced shell that's available in Metasploit. We use a reverse TCP. What a reverse TCP means is once I exploit you, send the shell back to me, or shovel a shell, we like to call this. This allows the victim to connect to us. It's how do we get out of a secure environment if a firewall is involved. And then we set L host, which is the host of the machine we're running our server on, and the L port, the port to come back and connect to us. And then show options shows you the options to set for this exploit. So if you see there, we've got the file name, we got the location. Is it required? Yes, yes. Is anything else required? Nope. Okay? Then in our payload options, it tells us what's required. The L host, the L port, and the process. We have all three of those, so it looks like we're in pretty good shape. The exploit target, this is against Adobe Reader 8.1.2. An older version of Adobe, but sometimes we run into those. But it doesn't matter, because Adobe's a well-attacked target, and every time you turn around, there's a new attack against Adobe. Okay, so we say that we're binding it actually to lhost 0000, which means all interfaces. Starting a reverse handle, and we create the upgrade instructions.pdf. The upgrade instructions.pdf, that file is what we created. And then we're going to generate the output and create the exploit, but no session. Why? Because it's waiting. With this reverse handler, it's waiting for a connection back to it. This is a reverse shell. So when the user double clicks to open this, it's actually going to send traffic back out to the user so we can do the exploit. However, we create a listener on the victim to come to us, and this is what we're showing here. Use exploit multi-handler, payload Meterpreter reverse TCP. We set it up, give it that local port 4455 because that's where it's going to come, our host, and then exploit. And now it's actually exploited waiting, started reverse handler. So it's sitting there with the payload waiting for the connection to us, which is the reverse shell. All we do is, you can use a tool within Windows or Metasploit called send email, okay, which is in Unix, in Linux and Unix, and it shows you how we do it. We just send an email. We send our upgrade instructions.pdf as an attachment, right? And you type in the message, IT department. We are sending this important file to all our customers. Contains very important instructions for upgrading and securing your software. Please read and let us know if you have any problems. It sounds kind of real to me. And we send it off. Passes antivirus scan. It's just a path to the file to invoke the vulnerable app. Antivirus scan looks at it and says, no threats found. Victim, attachment, I got an attachment, it's a PDF. Oh, I know PDF's always got good stuff. Oh, look, upgrade instructions. This is how I upgrade my latest software, my latest system, da-da-da-da-da. It doesn't matter. Once we get the user hooked, they're hooked. Open the file, and look what we've got. When they open the file, it starts a Meterpreter session opened. It shows you the Meterpreter session going from one machine back to another machine, and guess what? We have a Meterpreter shell prompt. And now when we have that Meterpreter shell prompt, this means we can do anything we want. It's an advanced shell within Metasploit. So what can we do? PS, process status. This shows us the process is running on the machine. Well, we don't like to leave it on the process that we exploited because that might actually hang or crash. So let's migrate it. We can use an advanced feature within Meterpreter where we can migrate the process migrate the exploit to another process. In this case, we migrated to process 1520. What is 1520? The Explorer process, the desktop. How many people is going to kill their own desktop? Not many. So this is usually a good technique to remain undetected. Okay? Use priv, you can use privilege, you can do a key scan, you can start keystroke sniffer, so you can do a keystroke logger once you've done this. Key scan dump, and you can dump information. So you can do all this information just by getting a user to double click the PDF attachment. How many of you out there get PDF attachments? This is why RSA, a lot of these other really big corporations have been hacked because people double clicked the attachment. Client-side exploits. Metasploit has a number of them. They have binary payloads, they have antivirus bypass, and they have binary Linux Trojans. One of the few tools that have Linux exploits. They have Linux exploits, and they have a really cool tool out there called Metasploiter that you can actually download and Metasploitable and practice hacking Linux. Here's an example of a binary payload. This is ability to generate an executable from a payload, but it's an executable, so it's a little bit harder to get past most people remotely. You have to get it on local, all right? So what it does here is we can actually set up an actual reverse connection with an executable payload. And that's what we're showing in the example here. We got an executable payload, lhost, and we're using reverse, and we're using a port 31337. Hopefully some of you out there, when I say 31337, a little smile comes over your face, because you remember 31337 is the elite in the mirror reflection, and it is the port of Cult of the Dead Cows back orifice, one of our classic Trojans, or well, remote access utilities, not a Trojan, remote administration tool if you listen to the Cult of the Dead Cow, that we had for years and years and years. So in this case, we're using 31337 just for historical accuracy. Okay, as you go through and you look through, you see we're actually setting up, in this case, an MS-DOS executable. What's nice is we can set up an executable for DOS, we can set up an executable for Mac, we can set up an executable for pretty much any environment. And then MSF console is Metasploit. We open up Metasploit, and all we do is use exploit multi-handler, show options, exploit, and away we go. And that's how we set up our exploit there, and add a diagram there. So we're setting up our binary payload, just like we've done before. And what are we going to do? We're going to exploit it and use a Windows, just a shell instead of an interpreter shell this time, reverse TCP. So again, a reverse shell will come back and connect to our, in this case, we're using Backtrack, connect back to our Backtrack machine. And there's the exploit, and there it is, command shell session 2 opened, payload handler, and it's using Microsoft Windows XP. So this is a Windows XP box that's connected back to us after double-clicking that executable that we created. How would you get the executable there? You put somebody's USB drive and say, hey, here's a really cool, some music I downloaded, install it on your computer, double-click it. There's a lot of different ways to get the users to click. That's our job as a red team hacker. We try different variants to get the users to basically fall into the trap. If they don't fall into the trap, document it and move on. Antivirus bypass. There's always a chance we could get detected. We know antivirus is going to be there more than likely. Metasploit has an encoding tool. So if you go into MSF encode-H, it shows you different ways to encode your payload, encode your shellcode, encode your attacks, make them harder to find. This is what some people like to call weaponize your exploits. But again, this is what you want to do when you're doing them within your scope of work, especially a red team, because antivirus is probably going to detect if you use standard generic types of tools. Like Netcat will almost be detected by every antivirus if you don't modify and change it. Here's some encoders for you, as I say, MSF encode-L for the list. These are all the different encoders. Several of these encoders will get past a lot of your intrusion detection systems. So what you do is, when you're doing your red team hacking, what you want to do is you want to create a lab environment. All right? I've actually done a really good presentation on this, Hacker Halted Miami, but it shows you how to build a range to test and work with a red team. So you can set up a red team environment, test it, and find out what works and doesn't work. So when you actually go into your environment, remember step number 1, plan, plan, plan again. When you think you're done planning, plan some more, because you probably missed something. And by planning, you'll be able to go into an environment and do the exploit. Trial and error. First attempts might fail. This is why you have to practice and practice and practice again before you go out into the wild. There's no way to guarantee you're going to bypass the antivirus. Have to do your homework. This is all part of your information gathering. What antivirus do they use? Hopefully in your homework you can find that out. That reduces your risk. Only you can do your homework and your research. Once you identify a defense, lab it up. See what works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Exploitation's not 100%. Remember that. And when you do your lab environment, do it on a flat network. If you can't exploit it on a flat network, why challenge yourself with putting filters and everything in between it? Once you exploit it on a flat network, then move and put firewalls on and filters and routers and those types of things and figure out a way through those. Don't waste your time if you can't even exploit it on a flat network. Then we got to the ever famous thing we like to call drive-by download. Those of you that go in a browser, you go to an infected site and you download some piece of malware. Very popular attack today. Vector happens all the time. Not only does it happen on computers, it's happening on phones and devices. Client visits infected page, browser downloads the malware. We love this because now we can do it. 80% of the malware in 2012 was not detectable by antivirus that were released in 2012. We call it the 80-20 rule. Usually antivirus does better than that. The 80-20 rule stands for 80% of the malware will be detected by your antivirus, but 20% will be missed. Right? This is because there's financial backing in malware development, their complete software life cycles, and there's a lot of big money being made in identity theft and those types of things, and that's why malware is so prevalent out there today. And now we're going to do a lab attacking clients.